Hey guys, wanted to take a few minutes and give you some extra information about some of the content this week. I know the content is a little heavy because we're talking about measurement and sampling, so I thought I would clarify a few things for you just straight off the bat. In chapter 9, we really jump into understanding measurement. Now, measurement, when you're looking at your topics, which all of you have been looking at choosing your topics, you find a dependent independent variable in your research question, right? So your dependent variable is your behavior or your issue. Then your independent variable is the intervention that you're putting in place to make a change in your dependent variable. So measurement is all about measuring that dependent variable and the change within. Okay, so we want to make sure that we can measure that. Now I've talked to a lot of you guys about we're narrowing your topics and uh, looking at specific variables within your issue, right? Maybe you're looking at this particular issue in males or females or a certain age group. Okay, so those variables become very important. We have to be able to measure them. Okay, so there are 4 levels of measurement you need to understand, and the book kind of goes into a little bit more detail about these. So there's some pretty good examples in there, but I just wanted to kind of hit them pretty quickly. They're nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. So nominal is really the least complicated level of measurement. Um, Nominal are things that can be measured in terms of one or the other, meaning things like sex. You're either male or female. You know, birthplace a lot of times falls into that realm, and I think there's a really good example of that in the book. But usually, it's the simplest. It can be one thing or another, like yes or no, male or female. It's pretty simple level of measurement. We move on to a little bit more complicated level when we look at ordinal. Ordinal is order. Just think of ordinal as orderly. It can be ranked. Think about it like in terms of like a satisfaction survey you take. You rank satisfied, very satisfied, extremely satisfied. Those it could be ranked in an order. Okay, so a little bit more complex than the nominal. Then we move up to interval, where ordinal talks about something can be ranked in terms of in an order. Thus ordinal. But interval means that there's a distance between those rankings, and the distance has a significance. Okay, a good example of this might be uh, points like on a test. There may not be that much significance between a 95 and 100 because it's still an A, right? But there might be a big difference between an 85 and a 90, between a B and an A. The book has a good example about IQ scores. There's, the difference, the 5-point difference on an IQ score, if it can mean something if it's below a certain level. So just keep in mind, ordinal it can be ranked in order, but interval means that order means something. The distance between those two rankings in order can have a significant meaning. Okay. And then the highest level of measurement is ratio, means there is a true zero. Like someone can have no, age ranges, that you can have theoretically be 0 years old, until you're born, and then up to a certain level. You can have zero money. There can be a lot of times in measurement you see that as an age, a range, like a salary range, like you check the box for the salary range you fit into. But there is a true zero there because someone can have no money, or someone can have no children, or those kind of things can be measured in a ratio because there is a true zero value for that information. Okay, so that kind of hits on the 4 major levels of measurement. So those are good to understand when you're dealing with your dependent variables and trying to shore up your measurements. Okay. Now, when we describe measures, I think this is important vocabulary kind of difference that you see in research. As you're reading a lot of research, they're using terminology that may be a little bit different. And I think this is a good time to explain that while you're measuring them. You might find there's a correspondence between two things. So correspondence not only means a relationship between the two, and standardization, that comes into play, if you're using a standard measure, meaning, say you are looking at if some intervention has an effect on a depression. Let's just use that as an example. You may use a standardized like depression inventory to determine if that change has been made. So, kind of baseline information, and then after during the intervention to see if there's a change. So, you're using a standard measure that's accepted by the scientific community or by the social work community. That would be considered standard. Okay. Quantification just simply means that you're going to quantify or measure based on a numerical value. Okay. And duplication. I mean, there is a lot of, and I think I've said this to several of you, there is duplication in research. There's a lot of value in duplication. There's not always something new and different to do, but you might have a slight tweak on what the other person's done. If this research is showing effectiveness in males, could it also be worked in females? If it's showing effectiveness in a rural area, could it work in an urban area? Those kind of things. So there's a lot of duplication that happens in research, or duplication during your measurements as well. Okay. Now, when we move on to, selecting your instrument, there's some things to consider. But the two I really want to hit on, and there's another video in this class about reliability and validity, but those are usually the biggest, the most heavy hitters. Reliability looks at how just simply how it says how reliable the data that you're collecting is. Meaning, if you did it over and over and over, if you did it 100 times, would you get the same result? If a classic example for this is on a scale. If you get on scale and you weigh 100 pounds, okay, if you get on there 20 times, and you still get the same result, your weight is reliable, right? Now, validity comes in to where if that scale is 10 pounds off, 10 pounds, it weighs you 10 pounds lighter, you're getting reliable results by your 20 times, but are they valid? Because the scale is not, calibrated correctly. So it's not a valid result, even though it's reliable. Because validity speaks to how valid the result is. Is it actually replicable? Is it is it a accurate result, I should say. Okay, so understanding those two, reliability and validity, become very important in the research because a lot of things go into reliability and validity. How your instrument, how you choose it, how you administer it affects the reliability and validity of the outcomes. Also, things that people don't think about are your literature review. Your literature review affects your reliability and validity, because that is the point where you make the argument that this study should be completed. What others have found may have built the foundation for you to get to this point to conduct this research. So that takes into account on your reliability and validity also, especially your validity, to make sure it's a valid result and has some meaning. Please feel free to reach out. I know this information is kind of heavy, so I want you guys to feel like you have resources, to discuss it if you have questions. Okay, and this will be helpful as you formulate your method section, because even though we're not going to actually collect the data, conduct the research, you still have to gather, put your methods down. This is basically the instruction manual for how you would complete your research. So we have to have all that shored up for your research proposal. Okay, so there's also another video on sampling on down provided in the module, so be sure and check that out as well. So I know you guys have heard me drone on a little bit about this quite a bit, so I just hope this is helpful in helping you kind of simplify and understand measurement and sampling. So like I said, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. Take care.